One choice. One moment. One love story. Welcome to When He Chose Her. Enjoy the story. The night a billionaire collapsed. Everyone rushed to save his fortune before they tried to save him. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light across the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Hotel, turning every glass of champagne into liquid gold. Manhattan's wealthiest families moved from table to table in custom suits and silk gowns, smiling with the polished precision of people who treated life like a business deal. At the center of it all stood Damian Whitmore, 38 years old, founder of Whitmore Dynamics, owner of towers, jets, and headlines. His tuxedo fit like it had been designed around ambition itself. In one hand, he held a crystal flute. On the other arm rested Vivian Sterling, his fiancée, flawless in white satin and diamonds bright enough to compete with the chandeliers above. They looked like the cover of a magazine no one could afford to subscribe to. But appearances, as Damian knew better than anyone, were often the cheapest things in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, tapping his glass lightly. The room quieted at once. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused in the air. Even the string quartet softened into silence. Power had its own sound, and it sounded like people waiting for one man to speak. Damian smiled the way experienced men smiled when cameras were nearby. "Thank you for joining us tonight. This city has given me more than I deserve, and standing beside me is the woman I intend to give everything back with." Applause rose like a wave. Vivian pressed a manicured hand to her chest and leaned into him at exactly the right angle for the photographers. She had practiced grace until it looked natural. Damian glanced down at her. She was beautiful, disciplined, admired, and entirely unreadable. He had negotiated billion-dollar mergers faster than he had understood the woman wearing his ring. Across the room, Clara Bennett balanced a silver tray of sparkling water and untouched hors d'oeuvres. 26, sharp-eyed, and dressed in the black and white uniform of the catering staff, she moved through the ballroom with quiet efficiency. She had worked weddings, funerals, political fundraisers, and enough rich parties to know that expensive perfume could not cover the smell of desperation. She noticed everything because no one ever noticed her. The groom-to-be smiled too carefully. The bride laughed too quickly. The investors near table 7 were already discussing who would inherit which contracts if anything ever happened. Clara had learned that wealthy people often mourned in advance. Damian continued speaking. "When I was 23, I had one laptop, a rented desk, and exactly $11 in my checking account." Laughter and admiration followed on cue. "Tonight, I have something worth far more than any company." He turned toward Vivian. "Trust." The word landed softly. Vivian's smile held for a fraction too long. Clara caught it. So did no one else. Damian lifted his glass as if to toast the future. Then his fingers loosened. Crystal slipped, struck marble, and shattered into bright fragments. The sound cracked through the ballroom like lightning. Damian swayed once. His face drained of color. Then the Billionaire CEO collapsed. Screams scattered across the room. Chairs scraped backward. Someone dropped a plate. A violinist gasped so sharply she missed a note. Vivian froze before she lunged forward, falling to her knees in dramatic horror. "Damian! Damian!" she cried, voice trembling beautifully. Guests crowded in circles, some concerned, others curious, many filming discreetly with phones lowered near their waists. A retired senator demanded space. A hedge fund manager loudly announced he knew CPR, though no one asked. Two influencers began crying despite never having met him. Clara set down her tray and moved closer, not rushing, just watching. Damian lay still, one arm across the marble floor, the perfect picture of sudden tragedy. Too perfect. She noticed the measured rise of his chest, the controlled slackness in his jaw, the tiny tension in his left hand, as if resisting the urge to move. Not dead, not unconscious, performing. Hotel security arrived, followed by an on-site physician from the private medical team Damian had insisted the event carry. The doctor knelt, checked pulse, shined a penlight, and looked up grimly. "Call an ambulance." "He's unresponsive." Gasps spread faster than facts ever could. Vivian sobbed into a napkin while subtly adjusting her hair away from her face. "He can't leave me," she whispered loudly enough for 3 cameras to hear. Clara almost laughed. Instead, she bent to collect shattered glass beside the fallen billionaire. As she reached near his shoulder, She murmured so softly no one else could hear. Your right eyelid twitched. Damien did not react. Good discipline. She continued sweeping fragments into a linen cloth. But if you're going to fake a collapse, she added under her breath, next time don't choose imported crystal. That stuff breaks too dramatically. For one impossible second, the corner of Damien Whitmore's mouth almost moved. Then paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. Orders were shouted. Guests parted. Vivian climbed aboard emotionally until a medic asked her to step back. She nearly forgot to cry before remembering it again. As Damien was wheeled toward the ballroom doors, Clara stood with the broken glass in her hands and watched the city's most powerful man disappear beneath fluorescent emergency lights. Around her, guests immediately began whispering about stock prices, board seats, and postponed honeymoons. The quartet had stopped playing entirely. Clara picked up one final shard from the floor and slipped it into the trash. Rich people, she said quietly to herself, always making a scene. Then she grabbed another tray and went back to work. At 2:15 in the morning, the private recovery suite on the 12th floor was silent except for the soft rhythm of machines designed to reassure wealthy people. Curtains were drawn. Monitors glowed blue in the dark. Outside the glass doors, 2 security guards stood like furniture that could tackle someone. Inside the bed, Damien Whitmore opened one eye, then the other. He stared at the ceiling for a moment and exhaled. I hate hospitals, he muttered. Instantly, the heart monitor technician in the corner nearly jumped out of his chair. Damien sat up, removed the oxygen tube from beneath his nose, and rubbed his jaw. You can stop. Pretending now, Martin. Dr. Martin Reeves stepped out from the adjoining office, loosening his tie. You are aware most patients wait until discharge paperwork before making jokes. Damien swung his legs off the bed and stood. Most patients do not own the hospital wing. Martin sighed. You own shares in the company that owns the building. That is not the same thing. Damien smiled faintly. Close enough. He walked to the wall of screens hidden behind a panel. With one touch, 12 camera feeds lit the room. Ballroom footage. Hallways. Elevator lobbies. The penthouse apartment he shared with Vivian. His office reception area. The legal conference room at Whitmore Tower. Martin folded his arms. You staged a public collapse, terrified 300 guests, tanked your stock in after-hours trading, and traumatized a violinist to test your fiancée. I am required as your physician to ask whether you have lost perspective. Damien kept watching the screens. I need facts. No, Martin replied. You need therapy. Damien ignored him. If Vivian loves me, she will stay steady. If she loves the life, I will know by sunrise. Martin glanced toward the door. And if she does love you? Damien did not answer quickly enough. The doctor nodded once, as if that silence had told him everything. Try to sleep, Martin said. I doubt your ego needs rest, but your body does. When the door closed, Damien reached for the remote again. On screen 6, Vivian sat in the hospital family lounge wrapped in a cashmere blanket, crying into a tissue while speaking to someone on speakerphone. Damien turned up the audio. I know this looks terrible, she whispered. Pause. No, postpone St. Bart's. Obviously postpone St. Bart's. Another pause. Then her face changed. Calm. Sharp. Listen carefully. If he does not recover soon, the board will panic. We need to secure voting proxies before Monday. Damien's jaw tightened. She dabbed one dry eye dramatically when a nurse passed by, then resumed in a lower voice. And call Gerald. If there is no updated will, I need options. Damien lowered the volume slowly. There it was. Not grief. Strategy. The room felt colder than the thermostat. Claimed. A knock sounded at the door. Before he could answer, it opened halfway and Clara Bennett stepped in backward, pushing a stainless steel cart with soup, crackers, coffee, and exactly the expression of someone unimpressed by luxury. She turned, saw Damien standing beside the bed, and did not scream. Good, she said. You are alive. That saves paperwork. Damien blinked. How did you get in here? The guards assumed anyone carrying chicken noodle soup belongs somewhere important. She rolled the cart beside the bed and looked him up and down. You look better unconscious. You knew? Please. She adjusted the tray table. You collapsed like a man who had watched tutorial videos. Damien almost laughed despite himself. What are you doing here? Night catering overflow. The hospital contracted our company after your little theater production created overtime. She lifted the soup lid. Steam rose between them. Also, your doctor asked for someone normal to check whether you had become unbearable. Damien took the spoon. And your diagnosis? Advanced unbearable with traces of loneliness. He stared at her, then laughed outright for the first time that night. The sound surprised both of them. Clara handed him a napkin. Careful. If the nurses hear Joy, they will charge extra. He tasted the soup. It was simple and hot, and somehow more comforting than any meal served downstairs among chandeliers. You are not intimidated by me at all, are you? Clara leaned against the cart. Should I be? Most people are. Most people want something. She glanced around the room. I already have what I need. Rent money would be nice, but dignity covers the basics. On screen 6, Vivian resumed crying as another visitor entered the lounge. Clara noticed the monitors. You spying on your own tragedy? Collecting truth. Same thing with better branding. Damien set the spoon down. Tell me honestly, what do you think of Vivian? Clara considered. I think she knows where every camera is. That obvious? To women, yes. To men with private helicopters, apparently not. He smiled despite the sting. And what do you think of me? Clara straightened a pillow that did not need straightening. I think you are a smart man using expensive methods to ask a simple question. Which is, she met his eyes directly. Who loves me if I stop being useful? The room went still. Even the monitors seemed quieter. Damien looked away first. Clara pushed the cart toward the door. Finish your soup, fake patient. You will need strength for disappointment. Will I see you again? He asked before he could stop himself. She opened the door. Depends. On what? Whether you keep pretending to be unconscious. Then she left, and for the first time in years, Damien Whitmore was less interested in the woman wearing his ring than the waitress who had insulted him twice and somehow made him feel understood. By 8:30 the next morning, every business channel in America had the same photograph on screen. Damien Whitmore on a stretcher, eyes closed, tie loosened, empire uncertain. Analysts debated succession plans with the warm enthusiasm people reserved for disasters that did not belong to them. Whitmore Dynamics stock opened down 6%. 3 anchors described it as shocking. 2 called it inevitable. 1 smiled too much. In the private suite upstairs, Damien sat in a chair wearing a gray robe and watching his own crisis become entertainment. Your company is being discussed by a man who once sold blenders at 3 in the morning, Dr. Martin Reeves said, handing him black coffee. How does power feel now? Damien took the cup. Temporary. Martin glanced at the screens. In honesty, also temporary. On monitor 3, Vivian entered Whitmore Tower in sunglasses and a cream coat that cost more than most monthly mortgages. She walked quickly through the lobby, tears ready for anyone looking, gone the moment elevator doors closed. Damien pressed audio. Inside the executive conference room, 6 board members waited in worried silence. Vivian removed her glasses, sighed elegantly, and placed both hands on the table. This is devastating, she said. Damien always worked too hard. A silver-haired director nodded solemnly. Do the doctors know anything? They say the next 48 hours are critical. She lowered her eyes. He would want stability. He always said uncertainty invites predators. Damien snorted. I never said that. Martin raised an eyebrow. You did. At a Christmas party. Vivian continued. Until he recovers, I am prepared to help maintain confidence. Investors trust continuity. She slid a folder across the table. Temporary proxy authority. Emergency communications control. Access to strategic reserves. The directors exchanged looks. One younger member cleared his throat. This seems fast. Vivian gave him a sad smile polished by years of practice. Grief does not pause responsibility. Damien's hand tightened around the coffee mug. On another screen, his chief legal counsel Gerald Price entered late, carrying files. Vivian's posture changed almost invisibly. Alert now. Interested. She guided him aside after the meeting. Audio sharpened. Gerald, privately, she said. They moved into the hallway. Tell me there is an updated estate package. Gerald adjusted his glasses. The current trust remains active. Meaning if Damien becomes permanently incapacitated, control transfers to the board until medical determination. Vivian's smile vanished. And spouse rights. You are not yet married. Silence. Then a softer voice. Gerald, we have known each other for years. Yes. Then help me understand what options I have. Gerald looked deeply uncomfortable. Damien muted the screen. I have seen enough. Martin leaned against the counter. No. You have seen what pressure reveals. Different thing. A knock interrupted them. Clara entered with a breakfast tray, scrambled eggs, toast, sliced fruit, and no patience. Move, she told Martin. The fake invalid needs protein. Martin grinned and left immediately. I like her, he said on the way out. Clara set the tray down and glanced at the monitors. Morning cartoons for rich adults. Damien rubbed his temples. She is already trying to secure authority. Clara poured orange juice into a glass. You are surprised? I am disappointed. That means you expected better. She handed him a fork. That is on you. Damien stared at the eggs. You make sympathy sound insulting. Because sometimes it is. She walked to the window and opened the curtain. Manhattan blazed in morning sunlight. Taxis moved like yellow sparks 12 floors below. Eat. I am not hungry. Excellent. Then this is character development. He obeyed without arguing, which irritated him more than her tone ever could. Clara noticed. You are used to ordering rooms, people, outcomes. I built what I have. I did not say you did not earn it. She turned back. I said you forgot it does not purchase sincerity. He took another bite. You always speak like this. Only to men pretending to be unconscious. A knock came again. This time it was a nurse carrying flowers the size of a small tree. From Miss Sterling, she said. The card read, My heart is beside you every second. Wake up to me soon. Love always, Vivian. Clara read it upside down. Lovely handwriting, she said. Very expensive ink. Damien tossed the card onto the table. Throw them out. The nurse hesitated. Clara smiled kindly. I will handle it. Once the nurse left, Clara carried the arrangement toward the door. Then she paused, removed 3 white roses, placed them in a water glass by the window, and continued out with the rest. Why keep those? Damien asked. The flowers did nothing wrong. He laughed despite himself. A moment later she returned empty-handed. What happens now? She asked. Damien looked toward the screens where commentators still speculated about his fate. I continue the test. Clara folded her arms. No. Now the test begins. Difference. Last night people reacted to fear. Today they choose. She pointed at monitor 3, where Vivian was smiling at cameras in the lobby before remembering to look sad. There is your answer starting already. Damien watched in silence. Clara picked up the untouched fruit cup and ate 1 strawberry. For the record, she said, walking out. If I ever send flowers to a man in a coma, they will be real. Then the door closed, leaving Damien Whitmore staring at the 3 roses on the windowsill and wondering why they looked more honest than anything else in his life. By late afternoon, the storm around Damien Whitmore was no longer medical. It was financial, social, and deeply embarrassing. 3 board members had requested emergency authority. 2 rival companies had released statements about stability. Someone online was already selling commemorative shirts with his face and the words too rich to rest. Damien stood near the suite window in borrowed sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt, staring at the city below. He had not worn clothes without a logo in 15 years. Humbling, Dr. Martin Reeves asked from the doorway. Itchy, Damien replied. Martin checked his watch. You need to be back in bed in 10 minutes. Nurses are beginning to suspect miracles. Damien ignored him. Any updates from legal? Gerald says Miss Sterling called 6 times. About me? About trusts, signatures, and whether temporary incapacity includes selective memory. Damien let out a slow breath. Perfect. Martin opened the door wider as Clara entered backward, pushing another cart. This one held soup, grilled cheese, iced tea, and a slice of pie under a glass dome. Dinner for the man who faked a coma and somehow became hungrier than ethics, she said. Martin laughed and left immediately. I am abandoning medicine for entertainment, he announced. Clara parked the cart by the bed. Damien eyed the tray. That is a lot of food. You are dramatic. Dramatic people need carbohydrates. She pointed toward the bed. Lie down. I am perfectly capable of standing. Yes. You are also perfectly capable of making bad choices. Bed. He obeyed again, which annoyed him enough to notice it. Clara adjusted the tray across his lap and handed him a spoon. Soup first. You sound like a prison warden. You sound like a man who has never been told no. He took a bite. Tomato basil. Hot, sharp, simple. This is good. I know. I made them add salt. She moved around the room, straightening objects no one else would notice. The flowers by the window, a crooked magazine stack, the blanket folded badly at the foot of the bed. Damien watched her quietly. You do not act like staff. Clara glanced at him. And you do not act like a patient. I mean it. Most people in service are careful around people like me. People like you? Powerful. She almost smiled. People like you are? Usually one delayed flight away from a tantrum. Damien laughed into his spoon. That was rude. That was accurate. He studied her. You always this honest. Only when tips are impossible. She uncovered the pie and sliced it neatly. Apple. Trying to impress me? Trying to keep you quiet for 30 seconds. She set the plate down. Damien shook his head. You know, everyone else in this building seems terrified of me. That is because everyone else believes your money can change their life. She sat in the chair near the window as if it belonged to her. Mine already changed when rent went up. The line landed sharper than she intended. Damien noticed. You work here full-time? No. Catering nights. Hospital overflow when rich men collapse theatrically. Breakfast shift at Maple Street Cafe. Weekend bookkeeping for a laundromat owner who thinks spreadsheets are witchcraft. 3 jobs. For if I count explaining common sense to billionaires. He stared at her for a moment. Why? Because bills enjoy teamwork. He set down the fork. That is not what I meant. Clara looked out the window before answering. Because some people do not have the luxury of one grand career. Some of us stack survival one paycheck at a time. Silence moved through the room gently. Damien felt, for once, that speaking less might be smarter. Then his phone on the counter buzzed. Martin had left it there for internal calls only. Clara picked it up, checked the screen, and raised an eyebrow. Vivian. Ignore it. The phone buzzed again. And again. Clara answered on speaker before he could object. Intensive care suite, she said calmly. Vivian's voice came sharp and elegant through the room. Who is this? Someone with pulse access. Put Damien's physician on. Unavailable. Then get me administration. Clara glanced at Damien, who was trying not to smile. Certainly. While I transfer you, quick question. What? If your fiancé wakes up, should we tell him you asked about passwords before prognosis? Dead silence. Then the line disconnected. Damien burst into laughter, so suddenly he nearly coughed on pie. Clara handed him water without looking impressed. You cannot say things like that. I already did. She will be furious. Good. Anger is often the shortest route to honesty. He shook his head, still smiling. You are unbelievable. No, Clara said softly. I am just not for sale. The room quieted again. Evening light turned the buildings outside bronze and blue. For the first time in years, Damien forgot to check markets, messages, or headlines. He simply sat there eating pie while a waitress reorganized his expensive chaos. Clara, he said after a while. Yes. What if I deserve this? She looked at him carefully. The betrayal? The lesson? She stood, collected the empty dishes, and paused beside the bed. Maybe you do. He nodded once. She continued, voice gentler now. But deserving a lesson is not the same as being beyond one. Then she wheeled the cart toward the door. Get some sleep. Tomorrow your fake Coma enters season 2. Will you be back? He asked. She opened the door halfway. Depends. On what this time? Whether you remember to say thank you before asking favors. Damien straightened in bed. Thank you, Clara. She gave him the smallest smile yet. Better already. Then she was gone, and the room felt strangely larger and much less interesting. The next morning, rain tapped softly against the 12th floor windows, turning Manhattan into a watercolor of gray glass and headlights. News anchors still spoke in solemn tones about Damien Whitmore's uncertain condition, though their makeup remained flawless and their excitement poorly hidden. Inside the suite, Damien was lying in bed with his eyes closed as 2 board members visited for appearances. They stood near the foot of the bed, speaking in voices meant to sound respectful. He always pushed too hard, one said. A machine eventually overheats, said the other. Damien nearly smiled. Men who had praised him for years were now reviewing him like damaged equipment. The moment they left, he sat up. How long was I unconscious this time? Dr. Martin Reeves checked his tablet. 43 performative minutes. Damien rubbed his face. I need coffee. You need perspective, Martin replied. Coffee is on its way. Right on cue, the door opened and Clara Bennett entered carrying 2 paper cups and a brown bag from somewhere outside the hospital. I brought real breakfast, she said. The kitchen downstairs believes flavor is a liability. She set the bag on the table and pulled out warm bagels, eggs, and hash browns wrapped in foil. The smell alone improved the room. Damien looked almost offended. You left the building for me? Do not flatter yourself. I left the building for decent coffee. She handed him a cup. Yours is black. You seem like someone who argues with cream. He took a sip. It was excellent. You remember things. Only useful ones. She glanced at Martin. How is our actor? Difficult but stable, Martin said, then gathered his tablet. I have rounds. If he becomes dramatic, lower the room temperature. Once they were alone, Clara sat in the chair by the bed and unwrapped her own breakfast sandwich. Damien stared at her. You are eating my room service in front of me? I bought it. You are welcome to admire it respectfully. He opened the bagel wrapper. You know, nobody talks to me like this. That keeps coming up. It sounds less impressive each time. He laughed quietly. It had become easier around her, and that realization made him cautious. Clara noticed the monitors still active on the wall. Vivian was on one screen entering a jewelry boutique in Soho with dark sunglasses and a friend. Damien turned up the audio. I cannot keep wearing the engagement ring if reporters ask questions, Vivian was saying. People will analyze everything. Her friend picked up a diamond bracelet. You are grieving beautifully, by the way. Vivian smiled. Thank you. I have had media coaching. Clara nearly choked on coffee. Please tell me she is satire. Damien muted the screen. No. She is expensive reality. Clara shook her head. And you were going to marry that? Apparently I was. She studied him. Why? Damien looked toward the rain outside. Because she fit the life. Smart, elegant, connected, admired. No complications. And love. He gave a small shrug. I scheduled around it. Clara was quiet for a moment. That might be the saddest rich person sentence I have ever heard. He expected mockery. What surprised him was compassion. He changed the subject. What about you? What about me? Who fits your life? My landlord likes me punctual. I mean relationships. Clara peeled off a piece of bagel. I dated a musician once. What happened? He said my work ethic made him feel judged. Damien smiled. And before that, a bartender who believed astrology was financial planning. You are difficult to impress. No, she said. I am tired of repairing unfinished men. The words landed harder than intended. Damien looked down at his hands. You think I am unfinished? I think everyone is. Some people just hide it behind marble countertops. A nurse entered briefly to check vitals, nodded at Damien's suspiciously healthy color, and left. Clara waited until the door closed. You should be careful. About what? Getting comfortable lying down while everyone else moves around you. He frowned. Meaning if this goes on too long, you become exactly what you feared. Useful only when conscious. Damien leaned back against the pillows. You always turn breakfast into philosophy. Only with billionaires. She stood and walked to the window. Rain had slowed to mist. My father used to say storms reveal roofs. You only learn what leaks when pressure arrives. What leaked in your house? He asked softly. Clara's expression changed for a second. Private. Guarded. Enough. She turned back immediately. Finish eating. He did, sensing boundaries more expensive than any wall he owned. The phone buzzed again. Gerald Price. Damien answered on speaker. Tell me something good. Gerald sounded exhausted. I can tell you something true. Miss Sterling requested access to offshore account structures, asked whether signatures can be replicated under emergency powers, and invited 2 gossip columnists to a prayer vigil. Clara closed her eyes. A prayer vigil? At noon, Gerald said. With floral sponsorship. Damien pinched the bridge of his nose. Thank you, Gerald. He ended the call. Silence filled the room. Then Clara spoke. I have a question. Go ahead. When this is over, will you become better or just more careful? He looked at her for a long time. Outside, the clouds were beginning to break. I do not know. Clara picked up the empty wrappers and cups. Then figure it out before you stand up. She moved to the door. Clara. She paused. Yes. Why do you keep helping me? She thought about it, then smiled faintly. Because under all this nonsense, you look like a man meeting himself for the first time. Then she left, and Damien Whitmore found that for the first time in years, being alone felt less comfortable than being challenged. That evening, the city glowed clean after the rain. Every street reflecting gold and white like Manhattan had been polished for television. On the screens inside Damian Whitmore's suite, reporters stood outside the hospital discussing his condition with expressions usually reserved for national emergencies and celebrity weddings. One anchor called him a visionary. Another called him controversial. A third asked whether love could survive wealth. Damian muted them all. He was sitting at the small table by the window, no longer pretending to sleep unless someone official entered. The act was becoming harder, not because of guilt, but because lying still had given him too much time to think. A knock came once, then the door opened. Clara Bennett stepped in wearing jeans, sneakers, and a navy raincoat instead of the catering uniform. She carried a paper bag and looked somehow even less impressed by expensive surroundings. Damian stood automatically. "You are off shift." "Correct." She set the bag down. "And yet here I am, making poor decisions." He glanced at the clock. "It is almost 8. That is how clocks work." She pulled containers from the bag. Chinese takeout. Real food, warm and fragrant. The hospital menu listed chicken as a mood. I objected. Damian smiled before he could stop himself. "You came back. Do not make it sentimental." She handed him chopsticks. "I was nearby." "Nearby where?" "Library." He blinked. "At 8 o'clock?" Some adults still read voluntarily. She sat across from him and opened her own container. Damian noticed a thick textbook in her tote bag. Contracts and Corporate Law. He picked it up. Interesting hobby for a waitress. Clara reached for it too late. "Put that down." He turned the cover. Sticky notes marked nearly every chapter. Margins filled with sharp handwriting. "You are studying law." I said put it down. "Why did you never mention this?" She folded her arms. "Because I do not introduce myself like a resume." Damian set the book gently on the table. "You work 3 jobs and study law at night?" "For jobs, remember? Keeping billionaires humble is unpaid labor." "Clara." His voice softened. "Why?" For once, she did not answer quickly. She looked at the city beyond the glass. "Because when my father got sick, debt arrived faster than doctors. We lost our house, then his business, then the luxury of pretending hard work always protects good people." Damian stayed silent. She continued. "I was 2 semesters in a law school, Columbia. Then tuition became fantasy. So I paused. Paused. That is the hopeful word for stopped." She ate one bite, then added lightly, "I recommend optimism. It sounds better at dinner." Damian stared at her. "You got into Columbia Law? Scholarship. And now you serve coffee in the mornings?" "Excellent coffee." He shook his head slowly. "This city is absurd. Now you are learning." A message flashed on one of the muted screens. Vivian Sterling live at candlelight vigil. Damian unmuted. Outside the hospital entrance, Vivian stood before candles, flowers, and at least 12 cameras. She wore black cashmere and grief calibrated for high definition. "Damian is a fighter," she said tearfully. "He taught me resilience." Clara watched, fascinated. Has she ever met Damian? Unfortunately. Vivian continued. "All I ask is privacy during this painful time." Behind her, a branded banner read Sterling Foundation supports hope. Clara laughed so hard she had to set down her fork. Damian laughed too, then stopped when he realized how natural it felt sharing a joke with her. He changed the subject quickly. "Why corporate law?" Clara leaned back. "Because contracts shape lives long before people notice. Fine print decides who gets protected and who gets crushed." She glanced toward the screens. "Men like you understand that." "I do. Men like you often use that." The honesty stung because it was true often enough to count. Damian lowered his eyes. "You think I am one of them. I think you were raised to win rooms before you learned how to read them." The line landed deep. He did not defend himself. Instead he asked, "And now?" Clara looked at him carefully. "Now I think you are trying." The room went quiet. Traffic below sounded distant, like another world. Damian spoke after a long moment. "I can pay your tuition." Clara's expression cooled instantly. "There he is." "I did not mean—" "Yes, you did. You met effort and tried to solve it with money." She stood and began packing the empty cartons. "I am not a project. I was trying to help." "Then ask what help looks like before purchasing it." He rose too. "Clara, wait." She paused at the door, but did not turn. "Do you know what people like most about wealth?" she asked softly. "It lets them feel generous without becoming humble." Then she opened the door. Damian spoke quickly. I am sorry. She stopped. Real apologies had weight. She could hear this one searching for it. For assuming, he said. For making you smaller than what you are. She turned back slowly. Something in her expression had gentled. Good start. Then tell me what help looks like. Clara considered. Pass the bar in 6 months. I cannot afford the prep course or time off for study. Damien nodded. Done. She raised a hand. No check. No rescue. No grand gesture. Then what? You know people. Use your network to get me interview access after I pass. Nothing before I earn it. Damien smiled. That I can respect. Try respecting it quietly. She picked up her bag and textbook. At the door she glanced back once. And for the record, if you ever offer to buy my future again, I will charge consulting fees. Then she left. Damien stood alone in the expensive room, staring at the chair where she had sat, realizing that in 2 days a waitress had done what markets, rivals, and lovers never had. She had made him want to deserve something. By the 3rd morning, the hospital had become a stage set built around Damien Whitmore's silence. Reporters camped outside with umbrellas and caffeine. Board members arrived with concerned faces and sharpened agendas. Nurses moved through hallways whispering updates that were mostly guesses. Inside the suite, Damien stood dressed in fresh clothes, staring at the screens with less anger than before and more clarity than he liked. Vivian had escalated overnight. She had arranged an emergency shareholder briefing for noon and was privately pushing the narrative that Damien's long recovery required transitional leadership. She is not grieving, Dr. Martin Reeves said, scanning messages on his phone. She is campaigning. Damien exhaled slowly. I built a company from scratch and nearly handed it to a performance artist. Martin slipped the phone into his coat. Progress. Yesterday you would have blamed her. Today you included yourself. A knock came. Then Clara Bennett entered carrying no cart, no tray, no coffee. Just a legal pad, a pen, and the expression of someone who had arrived to fix stupidity. Good, she said. You are dressed. We are behind schedule. Damien blinked. We are. She tossed the legal pad onto the table. Yes. Your fiancé is trying to steal your company in tasteful heels, and you are standing here discovering humility. Martin laughed so hard he nearly dropped his chart. I adore her, he said, then wisely left. Clara moved straight to the screens. Show me everything. Damien handed her the remote without thinking. She noticed and said nothing. Footage rolled. Vivian meeting Gerald in the lobby cafe. Vivian speaking to 2 directors privately. Vivian rehearsing tears in a mirrored restroom. Vivian telling a stylist that navy looked more trustworthy than black. Clara watched like a prosecutor studying evidence. She is not subtle. She never had to be, Damien said. People usually mistake polish for character. Clara clicked pause on a frame of Vivian smiling between interviews. Then stop rewarding it. She turned to him. How long can you keep this act going? Another day, maybe 2. No, she shook her head. Too long, and she consolidates support. Too short, and she claims confusion. We need one clean ending. Damien folded his arms. Do not get sentimental. I enjoy winning. She began writing on the legal pad. At noon she hosts the shareholder briefing in your tower. She expects sympathy, urgency, and cameras. Excellent. Why is that excellent? Because greed loves witnesses. Damien stepped closer. You have done this before? No. But I have watched enough people underestimate preparation. She wrote 3 columns. Legal, public, personal. First, legal. Call Gerald. Have him confirm no transfer authority exists without your direct signature and appearance. Done. Second, public. Leak nothing. Let everyone gather. Cruel. Efficient. Third. Clara looked up. Personal. When you walk in, do not be angry. Angry men look guilty. Calm men look in control. Damien smiled faintly. You seem to know men well. Only their mistakes. Gerald arrived 20 minutes later carrying folders and anxiety. Clara briefed him with startling precision, citing bylaws she should not have known from memory. Gerald stared. Where did you study? Expensive places I could not afford to finish. You know corporate governance. I know how it harms people when no one else reads it. She pointed to a paragraph. And your emergency clause conflicts with Section 12 unless ratified. Fix that before noon. Gerald looked at Damien. Who is she? Damien answered without hesitation. The smartest person in the room. Clara rolled her eyes. Please conserve flattery. We have work. By 11:30, Damien was in a charcoal suit Martin had secretly arranged from his penthouse. Hair trimmed, shoulders squared. For the first time since collapsing, he looked fully like himself. Yet something had changed. He checked his tie in the mirror, then turned to Clara. "How do I look?" She studied him, like a man about to apologize to several hundred people. "I meant the suit. Still expensive, but less tragic." He laughed softly. Then his face grew serious. "Clara, what? Why are you helping me this much?" She capped the pen. "Because if people like Vivian keep winning, people like me keep paying for it." He nodded, but knew that was not the whole answer. "And because..." She met his eyes for one steady second. "Because I think the version of you after this might be worth meeting." The room went still. Even Martin, pretending to read near the door, wisely looked away. Damien spoke quietly. "When this is over, dinner. Real dinner. No lies. No collapsing." Clara picked up the legal pad. "Survive noon first." That is not a no. That is strategic sequencing. Gerald checked his watch. "Cars are ready." Damien took one step toward the door, then turned back. "If I hesitate in there?" Clara walked up, straightened his tie with quick, efficient hands, and stepped back before the moment could become something else. "Then remember this," she said. "You are not walking in to save your company. You are walking in to stop handing your life to the wrong people." He held her gaze longer than necessary. "Understood." As the elevator doors closed on Damien Whitmore, descending toward his own ambush, Clara stood in the quiet suite with the legal pad in her hands and realized something inconvenient. She was no longer helping just because it was right. She was helping because she wanted him to win. At 11:58, the executive auditorium at Whitmore Tower was full beyond capacity. Investors filled the front rows. Board members lined the stage. Reporters crowded the back with cameras raised like weapons made of light. On the giant screen behind the podium glowed a simple message: leadership transition briefing. The room buzzed with the elegant hunger of people hoping to witness either tragedy or opportunity. Usually both. Vivian Sterling stood backstage in navy silk, posture perfect, grief perfected, pearl earrings chosen because they suggested restraint. An assistant dabbed invisible powder from her cheek. "You look strong," he whispered. "I look inevitable," Vivian replied. She stepped onto the stage to warm applause. In the hospital suite 30 blocks away, Clara Bennett stood beside Dr. Martin Reeves watching the live stream. Martin folded his arms. "I dislike her professionally and personally." Clara did not look away from the screen. "Good. That means your instincts still work." Damien Whitmore was not beside them. He had left 10 minutes earlier through a service elevator with Gerald Price and 2 security officers. No announcement. No warning. Just a man returning to his own life quietly. On stage, Vivian placed both hands on the podium and lowered her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. "Thank you all for coming during this difficult moment," she began. Her voice trembled just enough to seem sincere. Damien has always believed this company was bigger than any one person. Several board members nodded as if hearing scripture. "While we continue to pray for his recovery, we must also protect the thousands of families who depend on Whitmore Dynamics." Applause rose again. She let it happen, then continued. "With the board's support, I am prepared to guide this company through uncertainty until Damien returns." In the suite, Clara muttered. "She says uncertainty like she ordered it." Martin nearly smiled. On stage, Gerald Price was seated near the aisle, face unreadable. Vivian glanced at him once, expecting reassurance. He offered none. A reporter raised a hand. "Miss Sterling, do you have legal authority for interim control?" Vivian smiled sadly. "This is not about control. It is about service." Another reporter called out. "Were wedding plans postponed?" The room laughed softly. Vivian placed a hand over her heart. "My only concern is Damien." Then the rear doors opened. At first, only a few heads turned. Then rows began to rise one after another like wheat in wind. Conversations died mid-word. Cameras pivoted so fast one operator nearly dropped his rig. Damien Whitmore walked down the center aisle in a charcoal suit, calm expression, steady stride, and the unmistakable energy of a man who had just canceled several people's plans. The silence became physical. Vivian gripped the podium. "Damien," she whispered, microphone amplifying the shock. He continued forward without rushing. "You look well," one stunned director blurted. "I had excellent care," Damien replied. He stepped onto the stage, took the spare microphone, and turned first to the audience, then to Vivian. My apologies for the confusion. Recovery can be sudden. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Vivian recovered quickly, moving toward him with practiced tears. You are awake. I was so worried. She reached for his arm. Damien stepped aside gently. The movement was small. The meaning was not. Thank you, Vivian. He faced the crowd. Since everyone is here, let us address leadership transparently. He nodded toward the screen technician. Play file sequence A. Vivian's face changed for the first time. Real fear. The giant screen flickered, then displayed security footage from the past 2 days. Vivian in the boardroom, pushing proxy control. Vivian asking Gerald about estate leverage. Vivian in the boutique, joking about optics. Vivian at the prayer vigil, adjusting candle placement for cameras. Gasps moved through the room in waves. Someone in the front row actually applauded once before stopping. Vivian turned pale. This is private manipulation, she snapped. This is selective editing. Damien answered calmly. No, this is selective honesty. Reporters surged forward. Questions flew like hail. Were you planning a takeover? Did you know he was conscious? Was the vigil sponsored? One board member quietly removed the interim resolution from his folder. Vivian straightened, dropping grief entirely. You humiliated me. Damien met her gaze. No, I gave you time. The line landed hard. She looked around the room and realized admiration had left it completely. Without another word, she stepped off stage and exited through the side corridor, cameras chasing her like gulls after a ship. The auditorium erupted into noise. Damien raised a hand, and the room slowly settled. Effective immediately, he said, there will be no leadership transition because there is no vacancy. There will, however, be changes. He looked toward the board. Starting with anyone who mistook my silence for permission. Several men discovered sudden interest in their shoes. Then Damien did something no one expected. He handed the microphone to Gerald and walked off stage. Through the side hallway, past startled assistants, past framed magazine covers of himself, he found Clara waiting near the service elevator with Martin. She leaned against the wall as if this were all mildly entertaining. Unthinkable enough? He asked. Clara looked him over thoughtfully. Almost. Then she stepped forward and smacked his shoulder with the rolled legal pad. Not hard, just accurate. Martin laughed out loud. What was that for? Damien asked, rubbing the spot. For faking a coma, Clara said. You deserved at least one honest consequence. He stared at her for 1 second, then laughed harder than anyone in the auditorium had. Outside the glass wall behind them, the city blazed in noon sunlight, and for the first time since he collapsed, Damien Whitmore felt fully awake. 3 months later, Manhattan had moved on, because cities always do. Markets recovered. Headlines found newer scandals. The candlelight vigil became a joke told at expensive lunches. Vivian Sterling relocated to Europe, where reinvention was easier and cameras were kinder. Whitmore Dynamics announced governance reforms, executive transparency policies, and a scholarship program for working adults returning to professional school. Commentators called it strategic rebranding. The people receiving tuition assistance called it life-changing. Damien Whitmore called it overdue. On a bright Tuesday morning, Maple Street Cafe opened at 6 sharp as it always did. The place was narrow, warm, and stubbornly unglamorous. Brick walls, scratched wooden tables, jazz low in the background, pastries cooling near the register. Regularly arrived in sequence like clockwork. The retired teacher at 6:10, the construction crew at 6:20, the nurse from night shift at 6:35. Clara Bennett moved behind the counter in a navy apron, tying her hair back with one hand while pouring coffee with the other. She was faster now, calmer somehow, though still armed with the same dangerous honesty. A framed envelope hung near the espresso machine. Passed the New York bar exam. No one had placed it there except everyone. Morning, counselor, called Mrs. Donnelly, the retired teacher. Too early for legal advice, Clara replied. But I can recommend muffins. She smiled more these days, though carefully. Success had not softened her edges. It had simply given them room. At 6:42, the front bell rang. Damien stepped inside, carrying rain on his coat's shoulders and uncertainty in his posture. The cafe did not pause. No one recognized him immediately, which might have been the healthiest thing to happen to him all year. He wore dark jeans, brown boots, and a plain blue sweater. No watch worth a car. No entourage. No announcement. Just a man entering a room where money had no reserved seating. Clara looked up from the register. "We are closed to emotional emergencies before 7. Damien exhaled. "Good morning to you too." She continued wiping the counter. "What do you want?" "Coffee." "That is a beverage. Be specific." "Black." Mood noted. She poured a cup and slid it toward him. "Anything else?" Damien glanced at the pastry case. "Honesty. We are low. Then whatever is fresh." She handed him a warm cinnamon roll. "Sit. I will decide later if you may stay." He took a seat near the window where sunlight cut across the table. The same city that once bowed around him now hurried past without noticing. It was strangely peaceful. Clara served 3 customers, corrected a delivery invoice, and fixed a jammed printer before approaching his table with a refill he had not requested. "You look different," she said. "Older. Less decorated." He smiled. "I sold the penthouse." "Good. Too many windows can confuse people into thinking they are enlightened. I moved into a townhouse in the village. Smaller. By 90%. Excellent. Maybe now you can find your own kitchen." He laughed softly. It still amazed him how naturally she rearranged his ego. "How is school?" he asked. She leaned against the chair opposite him, but did not sit. "Finished the prep course. Passed the exam. Starting interviews next week." "You earned it." "I noticed." He nodded toward the framed envelope. "I am proud of you." Clara's expression shifted for a second, touched despite herself. "Careful. Compliments from billionaires can sound taxable." He reached into his coat pocket and placed something small on the table. Not a velvet box. Not diamonds. A folded piece of fabric. Clara opened it carefully. A new navy apron, stitched by hand with silver thread. Clara Bennett. ESQ. She stared at it longer than expected. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly. "Probably," Damien answered. "But sincere." She ran a thumb over the lettering. "You had this made?" "I know a tailor." I tipped emotionally. For once, she laughed at first. Then she sat down across from him. It was the first time she had chosen to. "What are you doing here, Damien?" she asked. He answered without rehearsing. "Trying something I am not naturally good at." "Which is?" "Asking honestly for something I cannot buy." The cafe noise seemed to fade around them. Cups clinked. Milk steamed. Rain began lightly outside. Damien held her gaze. "Dinner with you. Real dinner. No cameras. No games. No fake illnesses. No strategic collapse." Clara studied him with the same intelligence that had seen through him on night 1. "And if I say no? Then I thank you for the coffee and come back next month to ask better." Persistent. Recovering. She looked down at the apron again, then back at the man who had once tested everyone because he trusted no one. He looked steadier now, less polished, more real. "One dinner," she said. "You choose the place?" "No," she replied. "You lost menu privileges when you faked a coma." He laughed. "Fair." She stood, walked around the table, and leaned down just enough to kiss his cheek softly. Simple. Brief. Entirely enough to stop his breathing for one surprised second. Mrs. Donnelly clapped from across the room. The construction crew whistled. Clara straightened and pointed toward the door. "Now leave. I have customers." Damien rose grinning like a man who had finally made a profitable investment in humility. At the threshold, he turned back. "What time tonight?" Clara lifted the apron and smiled. 7. And Damien. "Yes. If you collapse again, I am charging you ambulance rates." He laughed all the way into the rain. Behind him, she flipped the sign from open to busy, and for the first time in both their lives, the future felt less like a deal and more like a beginning. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Like the video, share it with someone who believes in real love, and let us know where you are watching from. And please subscribe to When He Chose Her for more powerful, emotional stories about truth, dignity, and unexpected connections. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.